Thanks very much for being here. Welcome, health professionals and allies. Our panelists today are myself, Program Director for PSR Colorado Physicians for Social Responsibility. We'll hear from Tracy Burnett, former state legislator and the prime sponsor of the Clean Heat Bill that is driving this gas infrastructure plan proceeding at the Public Utilities Commission. Then we'll hear from Patricia Garcia Nelson, the fossil fuel just transition advocate with Green Latinos Colorado, and then from Chuck Kutcher, PhD mechanical engineer with the Colorado Renewable Energy Society Policy Committee. Thank you for attending, and big thanks to the panelists for joining us today. When I say shaping the gas infrastructure plan for health, safety, climate, and consumers, we're talking about the Public Utilities Commission having a proceeding whereby Xcel has submitted its plan to, unfortunately, extend gas infrastructure throughout the state, throughout its territory in our state as our state's largest gas utility. But their plan is supposed to bring them into compliance with the Clean Heat Plan. We're, as Physicians for Social Responsibility, we're mobilizing health professionals and allies to address the gravest environmental threats to human health and safety. And that means climate change, and that means hazardous air pollutants associated with that gas infrastructure. And as advocates for health, we bring a unique voice to what we call the environmental movement, but really it's a movement for air quality, water quality, for a quality of life and the survival of our human race. So what is the Xcel Gas Infrastructure Plan? The Public Utilities Commission is charged with implementation of Colorado's Clean Heat Statute, and Tracy will tell you more about that as one of the prime sponsors. Our state requires gas utilities to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 22% by 2030 compared with 2015 levels. And this gas infrastructure plan is supposed to be a plan to comply with the state law. There are three major areas addressed by the plan. It's system safety and integrity. That means repair and replacement of the current gas infrastructure if needed. Capacity expansion, that means increasing the volume or the service area for the gas utility or the non-pipeline alternatives that are supposed to be replacing the gas infrastructure in this plan. And new business, real estate development, housing developments, business developments, new business is a key opportunity to, rather than build out gas infrastructure, start implementing NPAs, that is non-pipeline alternatives, and that includes electric heat pumps, but in new business, Chuck will tell you about how thermal energy networks can serve real estate development in the most efficient and economical and long-term way, protecting the climate and protecting our health from hazardous air pollutant emissions. So how does Xcel's gas infrastructure plan impact your health, safety, and finances? We're talking about the plan that Xcel submitted last year that we're all evaluating, and we are commenting on. PSR and Colorado Renewable Energy Society are co-intervening in the gas infrastructure plan proceeding, asking for changes to what Xcel is proposing. Xcel is proposing to charge consumers millions more for gas pipeline investment, exacerbating our energy costs that are already going up. It's jeopardizing our safety by extending gas pipelines, increasing the risk of leaks, fires, and explosions for impacted communities. It's impacting our health because gas combustion, indoors or out, harms our heart, our lungs, our other organs, especially for infants, children, and the elderly. But all of us have a degradation of our quality of life and a shortening of our lifespan as a result of hazardous air pollutant emissions from gas. And our climate is impacted by increasing methane and carbon dioxide emissions from gas leaks that fuel the climate crisis, causing heat waves, fires, droughts, and flooding. And if you want to look at a very obvious health impact, just look at wildfire smoke and what that does to our health. So how can the Public Utilities Commission protect your health, safety, and finances and the climate in this proceeding? Well, we are asking that the PUC require Xcel to implement a gas infrastructure plan that rejects billing consumers for unnecessary investment in current and future gas pipelines. We want to promote non-pipeline alternatives that I mentioned, heat pumps and thermal energy networks and geothermal heat pumps that accelerate Colorado's transition to clean heat solutions. We want the plan to help local governments and developers implement thermal energy networks that lower energy costs for residents and protect our health and safety and the climate. PSR National has released a couple of important reports in the last year, and one is called Fueling Sickness, the Hidden Health Costs of Fossil Fuel Pollution. And this report is not very long, and I will share it with you. I'll send you a link to this report after this webinar. And it covers how every system of the body is affected by fossil fuel pollution. PSR National also published an update to its compendium on the risks and harms of fracking, just diving in a little deeper to the harms to health from gas-fired residential appliances. And that is gas stoves, but it's also our furnaces, because furnaces, sure, they're not vented into your house, but they could leak into your house. And also they're vented into the neighborhood. So the ambient air pollution in the neighborhood and in the region is affected by everyone's use of gas-fired appliances. So we find that indoor and outdoor air pollutant emissions from gas damage our health. Uh, they not only harm the climate, but they emit ozone precursors. We have a serious ozone problem on our Front Range. They emit nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, and air toxins, VOCs that cause a wide range of serious health conditions. They especially, gas appliances especially aggravate asthma and contribute to hospitalizations and deaths that disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, and Latino communities. We'll talk, Patricia will be talking about the equity issues behind the gas infrastructure plan. And the costs of health impacts of gas can be assessed based on lost days of work and school, lost caregiving for families within families, lost services to business, increased insurance and taxpayer costs, and hospitalization costs. The hazardous air pollutants that are emitted by gas production, transport, and used by the consumers are nitrogen dioxide, a respiratory irritant that also impacts reproductive health. Carbon monoxide, we're all familiar with our carbon monoxide detectors. If you don't have gas in your home, you essentially do not need a carbon monoxide detector if you're not burning fossil fuels. And PM 2.5 particulate matter aggravates asthma, heart conditions, reproductive health, almost every system of the body. Even mental functioning can be affected by particulate matter. And the VOCs, including benzene, which is associated with leukemia. All of these are emitted by combustion of fossil fuels, by production, and sometimes by even transport by the pipelines themselves. So reliance on gas aggravates the climate crisis. Burning fossil fuels in buildings is responsible for about 29% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Uh, Gas is a fossil fuel called methane, and it leaks into the atmosphere during production, transport, and delivery, and is 86% more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide, the leading GHG over the 20-year period. And if you use gas, if we are required to use gas in our homes because we're forced by Xcel to invest in more infrastructure, that means more demands for production. And of course, oil and gas production is responsible for about 40% of our Front Range oil ozone pollution problem. and releases, again, carcinogenic benzene and other toxic air pollutants. So we do not need to burn gas in our homes. That's the good news. And this, if we do this gas infrastructure plan right, we will help everyone have emission-free heat pumps and thermal energy networks that are available now with robust rebates, but they will be even more accessible if we do the gas infrastructure plan right. Heat pumps heat and cool efficiently. Induction stoves heat cleanly and quickly, easy to control. Heat pump water heaters also eliminate the need for gas in our homes, and together these technologies protect our health and our climate. So I want to move to Tracy Burnett, who is the legislator who was a leader in passing Colorado's clean heat statute that is guiding our our work on the gas infrastructure plan. Tracy.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lauren. And if we could get our slides up in a second here. So, and if, yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, hi. Tracy Burnett, Colorado State, former Colorado State representative. I'm going to talk about three things today. I'm going to very briefly go over some of the laws behind the gas infrastructure plan. Talk briefly about a recent gas pipeline safety audit that the state did, and also how I think that the GIP can be improved. So next slide, please. Okay, there's two laws that direct the gas utilities to transition to clean heat. The big one is the clean heat plans. This basically sets statewide clean heat targets that require all gas utilities to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in buildings by developing clean heat plans. And it also specifies that by 2050 that they reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 100% compared to 2015 baselines. The other bill that directs this transition is another of my bills, gas demand side management, that basically greatly increases utility rebates for more efficient gas appliances, but also directs that these utilities eventually transition to heat pump technology. There's six other bills that support this transition to clean heat. And very quickly, one of them is building performance standards that reduces greenhouse gas emissions in existing buildings, as well as directing electric utilities to foster building electrification. Next slide, please. And a big one is building energy codes. This really tips the scale in terms of new businesses and residences to foster the adoption of heat pumps in new buildings. A couple other things. We directed the Colorado Public Utilities to take into account the social cost of carbon and equity in their decisions. That really helps low-income folk and people who are, so they're not left as the last people paying for gas infrastructure. And two other bills that lower electric rates for heat pumps, as well as fostering neighborhood scale non-gas pilot projects. So next slide, please. Okay, so what is a gas infrastructure plan? It basically identifies proposed plans for installing new gas lines, plus repairs and maintenance. And these gas infrastructure plans they are basically following the law that says they must support the utilities' clean heat plans, and those clean heat plans must support the statewide clean heat targets. So what's really important, though, is just because a law is passed doesn't mean it is implemented according to the law or in a way that the law intended. That is why it's so important to show up at these PUC hearings and state that we want the laws implemented the way that they're intended. So next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about a recent safety audit that was done of the Public Utility Commission and how they are monitoring and inspecting the gas infrastructure here in Colorado. Well, it was really quite damning. There were a lot of issues with it, including The inspections, they said there were incomplete inspections, they were missing inspections, the inspections didn't meet federal requirements. In terms of enforcement, 94% of over 5,600 violations were not enforced. And there are very few penalties that were assessed on these violations. In fact, and they didn't collect on them. $4.8 million was assessed or of penalties were assessed, but they only collected $5,000. There are also problems with accident and complaint reporting. They didn't report accidents or complaints. They didn't follow up on accident or complaints. There's also a lack of oversight and training. Some of the former utility employees turned around and then were or inspecting their former employers' uh, infrastructure. That just doesn't look good. And then there were some changes in the Public Utilities Commission management. The director and the manager both changed jobs. There's a new PUC director who started in 2023, I believe. But I also want to highlight one other thing. There were 9 instances of non-compliances that then resulted in 9 safety accidents. 5 of them were Xcel Gas pipelines. But let me tell you the results of those 9 safety accidents. There were 2 fatalities, dozens of injuries, including hospitalizations, several destroyed homes, over $1 million of damages, property damage. 6,400 customers lost their powers, some for up to 4 days. There are evacuations and highway closures. The bottom line is gas is dangerous. So this is why we care so much about getting off gas and getting into clean heat. So I'd like to go to my next final part, and that is so the next slide. What can be improved on this gas infrastructure plan? Well, first of all, I think Xcel needs to do a better job of leading with education. Like, how many people even know what a heat pump is? So they need to explain what they are and really explain the benefits. And Lauren had already talked about indoor and outdoor air quality. Well, I want to share a couple personal stories with you. First of all, I'm a world-class athlete, track athlete, but I have exercise-induced asthma and I'm sensitive to ozone. And so when we have all these ozone alerts that happened, I have to either scrap my workout or take it inside. And we've had an ozone problem here on the front Denver Metro and North Front Range for over 20 years, and it is not getting better. And the gas in buildings contributes greatly to that ozone problem. But I also want to talk about something else. And that is asthma. My son nearly died of an asthma attack when he was a toddler. Um, there was my precious little boy, oxygen mask on his face, stripped down to his diapers, monitors all over his body, his belly blown up like a balloon because he couldn't breathe, convulsing so violently in his crib, I had to hold him down so he didn't convulse right over the edge of the crib. And meanwhile, those doctors, thank God for those doctors, they're huddled over in a corner trying to figure out how to save his life. And all I could do was pray. He was in the hospital for 8 years, and it was years and years after that that I had to keep taking him in because of bad air quality. So sorry for getting a little emotional, but this is really important to me. And I predict, people are going to look at burning fossil fuels in their homes as lead paint the way they now. It is dangerous. And so we need to educate people on the benefits of clean heat and how to transition to clean heat. Another thing we need to do is we need to accelerate the transition to clean heat in existing buildings. I did a small market analysis just looking at residential new homes. And by 2032, over 140, I expect about 140,000 new single-family homes will be built in Colorado. Those are 140,000 opportunities to put in heat pumps. But at that time, I expect that we will have over 800,000 gas furnaces in existing buildings that need replacing. That's 85% of the total market. We need to go after existing buildings and replacing those heat pumps. But there's only a couple replacing gas furnaces. There's only a couple opportunities between now and 2050 in those existing buildings to swap out gas furnaces for heat pumps. And so, but that transition takes planning. You can't swap out a heat pump for a gas furnace for a heat pump in the middle of the winter. You need some planning, but you can replace an aging air conditioner with a heat pump, say in the summer. Next slide, final slide. So 3 other points. We need to tell public service to stop expanding the problem. They should, when somebody comes to them and wants to put in a gas furnace, we need to tell them first. They need to tell them first about heat pumps. Explain what heat pumps are, the benefits, and talk about rebates long before they talk about gas options. And this will help prevent stranded assets in our gas infrastructure. Finally, Xcel's gas infrastructure plan right now doesn't even incorporate Colorado's building energy codes. That's incredible. These are going to really help advance heat pump adoption in new buildings. So they need to at least put it in the forecast. And finally, there's a lot they can do in terms of improving the communication and outreach to people. If you take a look at the Xcel's website, and just assume you don't know anything about heat pumps. There's very few benefits explained about heat pumps. The heating solutions section doesn't even mention heat pumps. And there's no case studies showing how people can transition from gas furnaces to heat pumps. They can also greatly increase their partnerships by partnering with Green Building Guild and architects and Go Electric Colorado. So those are the things that I think we can improve. That's my part. So I'll pass it on to, I think Patricia's next. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that as a mom, that's what we do, right? Is we take care of our families. Give me 1 second so I can share the screen. Awesome. Okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on 1 second.
Looked good.
I'm trying to do the presenter mode so it has my notes.
Okay. Well, just for a moment, I will share, in case it hasn't been abundantly clear, what we're talking about is electrifying buildings or giving buildings access to geothermal networks. So these are two ways to make sure that our homes do not need to burn gas to access heat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. Again, my name is Patricia Garcia Nelson. I am the Colorado Fossil Fuels Just Transition Advocate for Green Latinos Colorado. We are a nationwide organization working on federal issues, but we have been also working on federal and very localized state and county issues in Colorado for going on 6 years now. My work primarily involves oil and gas operations, and so I'm very versed in upstream and midstream. And now I'm working more on my portfolio around the downstream part of oil and gas and what that looks like for us. What we did for our analysis of the gas infrastructure plan, because unfortunately we were not able to become parties to the rulemaking at the Public Utilities Commission or the PUC. But this is what we did. I was able to take a look at the information that was presented by Xcel, and specifically what we did is we looked at the proposed projects and the location of those proposed projects. And what we found is that of a total of 63 projects, there were about 70% of those in disproportionately impacted communities. And so what at the beginning, maybe it doesn't sound too bad. But for example, when we look at the types of projects that are in DICs, we have 75% of main replacements are in DIC, expansion or pipeline loops, 67% in DIC, compressor stations, 71% in DICs, upgrades, modernization projects, everything for the most part. It doesn't matter what kind of category they are putting it under. All of them, well, the majority are in disproportionately impacted communities. And I feel like one of the things that often gets missed, and I'll go over more figures here in a second, is that a lot of the times they're telling us that these are for our own safety, right? So they're calling them modernization projects, or they're calling them upgrades, and unfortunately, what ends up happening is they just end up expanding the lifetime of this gas infrastructure. For example, new pipelines are going to be in service and operational for at least 30 years. And there are several pipelines, even in Colorado, that are double my age. I'm 35 for those that are, wondering, but and then this is just one of the examples of oil and gas companies continuing to use aging infrastructure, even beyond the point that I would consider is safe. And again, Tracy mentioned the stranded assets. That's something that I feel that a lot of people are already experiencing. When we take a look at the upstream part of oil and gas, we are sitting on an orphan well problem. And we're going to have to pay for that. Just like Xcel ratepayers are going to have to continue to pay for these outdated oil and gas, and specifically in this case, natural gas infrastructure. And so when we talk about this and we talk about why it's so important, there's over $2 billion in gas investment proposed in Colorado from 2025 to 2029. And there are projections showing that the rates for Coloradans are going to raise up to 60% by 2040. That's not very, we're going to, that's not very far away. 2040 seems like a long time away, but it's really not. And we know, again, how Tracy was mentioning the pipeline safety audit. We're still seeing methane leaks. And then that's going to turn into ozone that impacts the entire state, especially here along the Front Range where we are experiencing severe ozone. And lastly, again, the communities that are the most impacted are disproportionately impacted communities. And one of the things that we like to mention at Green Latinos when it comes to citing is that when we think about it, a lot of the projects that are being cited typically get cited in disproportionately impacted communities. So why is that? And it's just typically because land that's zoned for industrial uses will continue to be zoned for industrial uses. And so our communities are the most burdened because we're the ones that live there. And so this is something that I'm sure many of y'all agree with, that it's not an accident. And so what we're hoping is that y'all are able to talk about these issues that Xcel is proposing and how they're impacting communities that have already been historically and systematically impacted for generations. Again, also, a lot of us are going to talk about things that we can do, electrification, heat pumps. We're also working on doing some work around thermal energy networks. And so that technology is up and coming, and I feel like it's very promising just because a lot of it is also very modular, and so it could be rebuilt and reconfigured to best support needs. And this is especially very exciting for me also just because I live in Weld County. We have an oil and gas problem, not just in the infrastructure, but in ways of being able to diversify the tax revenue for where I live. And of course, we can use more education and resources for weatherization and just overall efficiency. Priorities for Green Latinos, again, we want to stop the expansion of ratepayer-funded gas infrastructure. And we want to make sure that there is a requirement of the non-pipeline infrastructure projects for all of the GIP projects. Right now, there's a threshold that if these projects don't meet, they don't have to include any kind of alternative. Um, and we want the default to be that they have to do a non-pipeline assessment and no exception to disproportionately impacted communities. Disproportionately impacted communities are disproportionately impacted, like we just talked about a few minutes ago. And of course, we want the PUC to align the gas infrastructure plan to get us to a place where we're able to meet our clean heat targets. Green Latinos worked with some of our partners at Conservation Colorado and a few other organizations that put out a blueprint. And it shows that we are not on track to meet our emissions reductions goals in Colorado. And so we really need to make sure that these agencies are going to do their job and make sure that all of the things that they're approving are going to get us to our statewide goal. Um, and so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your Friday to talk about gas infrastructure planning.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And now we're going to hear from Chuck Kutcher. And we're doing pretty well on the time, I'm happy to say. So after Chuck, I will come back on and explain how we can all take action a little bit, and then we can do Q&A. Feel free to add your questions to the Q&A now if you'd like. Chuck, we can't hear you or see you yet. Are you there, Chuck? Let me see if I can unmute Chuck. Ah, there he is. We see you. Now we need to hear you.
Oh, you're muted, Chuck.
Okay, I had to stop sharing for my audio button to show up again. Sorry about that. I haven't had that happen before.
Let's give it a shot.
So, so now that I could see that button again, I can share my screen.
Excellent. Thank you.
And hopefully, all right. So you can hear me now, okay? And I think I'm in
Yes.
slide mode, right?
Yes. Looking good.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to start by saying a little bit about climate change. Look, air pollution is a big issue in Colorado, but what the thing that's really driving this big energy transition is the climate change issue. And we're living in a period right now where there's a lot of denial about it. I just want to remind people Jim Hansen of NASA testified to Congress about the seriousness of climate change, that we were already seeing it emerge. And I just want to remind people that this was 37 years ago. So climate deniers often say now, admit the climate is changing, but what they say is, look, it's always changed throughout the Earth's history. And I just want to point out why that's something that's true but irrelevant. So we Homo sapiens have been on this planet for 300,000 years, And it's only in the last 10,000 years that human civilization developed. Why is that? We came out of a glacial period, sea level and temperature came way up. We entered what's called the Holocene. And this period of very stable temperature and sea level existed. This allowed civilization to develop. We've driven ourselves way out of that regime, more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit of warming. And we know what's causing this. Carbon dioxide levels jumped way up as soon as we started burning fossil fuels. And as a result, the temperature has followed. And I hear people say that, we're contributing to climate change. If it wasn't for us, the changes in the orbital parameters of the Earth, we would have been at the peak of a temperature variation, and we would be in a slow cooling mode right now. We're causing all of the global warming. That has consequences. Not only have we heated the planet more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit on average, but it's happened very non-uniformly. For example, the Arctic has heated much more than mid-latitudes. What drives temperature, what drives weather patterns are variations in temperature across the surface. That drives wind patterns, weather patterns. These have changed dramatically. So this is data NOAA has been keeping for decades. And those bars indicate the number of billion-dollar disaster events. Those are all inflation adjusted. And you can see they've all been increasing. And this sort of pattern is going on around the world. This is the last chart available. NOAA has been forbidden from producing any more of these charts during this administration. And we know in Colorado, we saw the most destructive wildfire in Colorado history occurred in the wintertime 4 years ago. 1,000 homes destroyed, 2 people lost their lives, 1,000 pets died. Very, very hot, fast-moving fire, clearly linked to climate change. The good news is the cost of solar and wind energy have dropped dramatically. That means our electric grid is rapidly decarbonizing. You can see renewables growing. What do renewables consist of here? Solar and wind. Huge growth in solar and wind electricity generation. Here in Colorado, the electricity we get from Xcel will be 80% solar and wind in just 4 years. And this is what's happening globally. This is the global installed electricity generation. Here's solar. Here's wind. Look at the slopes of these curves. So solar is the biggest now supplier of electricity around the world. I think a lot of people don't realize that. All right, so look, we have this really low cost electricity from renewable solar and wind, but we need to use it. So we need to look at our end uses of energy and replace fossil fuels with electricity. In the case of transportation, we now have very, very cost-effective and efficient battery electric vehicles. And in fact, in Colorado, in the third quarter of last year, the last quarter we have full data for, Colorado had a higher percent of new car sales that are EVs than any other state. About 1/3, 1 out of every 3 new cars in Colorado were electric. In buildings, and this is what we're talking about here, we need to replace gas furnaces with heat pumps. And so Lauren had asked me to spend some time talking about how heat pumps work. So, what is a heat pump? I think all of us know that naturally heat flows from a high temperature to a low temperature. What a heat pump is, it's a device that moves heat in the opposite direction. All right. It basically extracts heat from a low temperature a source and moves it to a high temperature source. And we all have examples in our own homes, in our own daily lives of heat pumps. Window air conditioner. In the summertime, it takes heat out of your house at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, perhaps, and can dump it into outside air at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Here, the same thing, a refrigerator. It takes heat out of the refrigerator and dumps it into your warmer kitchen. Car air conditioner, hotel wall unit. These are all heat pumps. Well, often when we talk about a heat pump, we kind of talk about an air conditioner that moves heat in both directions. So in terms of replacing a gas furnace, here's an example. So this would be a heating cycle. This is winter operation. There's refrigerant that runs through this loop. In the outside, here the refrigerant gets evaporated, and here in the indoor coil, it gets condensed. The evaporation absorbs heat, the condensation releases heat. So maybe in a typical operation mode, you'd put a kilowatt hour of electricity into the compressor. It would pull 2 kilowatt hours of heat out of the cold outside winter air, and it would dump that 2 kilowatt hours into your house in addition to the heat content of the work that you put into the compressor. We would call this a coefficient of performance of 3 because we put in 1 kilowatt hour of work or electricity into this device, and we got 3 kilowatt hours of heat into the house. You could say it's 300% efficient. Not really efficient here because it's really just pumping heat from one place to another. And I just want to point out the average coefficient of performance in Denver is about 2.4 kilowatt hours of heat for every kilowatt hour of electricity consumed if you have a cold climate heat pump. If you're using the ground as a source, the ground is much warmer than outside air in the wintertime. You have a much higher COP. And kind of as a rule of thumb, in terms of what happens to your heating bill, uh, basically, in the case of the cold climate heat pump, if the ratio of your electricity to gas cost is less than that COP, 2.4 to 1, you'll save money going to a heat pump. And I just want to point out, once we account for the social cost of carbon, and this was the EPA cost in the Biden administration, but it was based on science, that cost of carbon emissions essentially doubles the cost of natural gas. So it makes it much easier to meet this requirement. We now have time of use prices for Xcel in winter heating. Uh, Off-peak times are 20 hours a day. Anything outside 5 to 9, the electricity is only 7 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's possible to run the heat pump that minimizes how much work it does during that 5 to 9 period. It's best though when you retrofit and replace a gas furnace with a heat pump that you also make the house more efficient. So look, the right solution is to rapidly electrify buildings. If we look at those efficiency, a gas furnace might be 90% efficient, cold climate heat pump 240%, and geothermal or ground coupled heat pump 400%. And so this is my house. This is my outdoor cold climate heat pump unit. There's the indoor unit. I have a heat pump water heater and also an induction stove top in my all-electric home. Heat pumps outsold gas furnaces in the U.S. by the biggest margin ever in 2024. That's good news. You go to ground coupled heat pumps. This is kind of a landmark project in Massachusetts where you have these boreholes that go deep. And you're communicating. Now you're in the wintertime, you're sucking heat out of the ground and dumping it into the homes. Much more efficient than taking it out of the cold air. Um, when you do this, like in a new home development, you reduce the cost of the whole natural gas infrastructure, all that gas piping. If it's a new home development, you save that cost. Again, it has a higher coefficient of performance, so you have lower heating and cooling bills. And one of the issues I'm sure Xcel is concerned about is we electrify homes. They're now a summer peaking utility. They have the biggest electric demand in the summer on a hot day. That'll shift to the winter when it's, below zero outside and everybody's heating their homes with heat pumps. The extent to which we can use the ground as opposed to the air will minimize both the winter and summer peaks. And this is a thermal energy network. This is the concept here. In this case, you not only have all these homes interconnected, but you have a data center, grocery store, fire station, various other things. A lot of these things have waste heat associated with them, and those also make the whole thing more efficient. So I thought I'd give you just some summary of what's it really like to live in a home with a heat pump in Colorado. Well, when you install it, probably going to cost between $15,000 and $20,000 to install a cold climate heat pump. So it's best to do it when you're replacing an old furnace. As Tracy mentioned, you can't wait until the furnace fails because if it's a cold winter period, you're going to want heat like now, okay? But in my case, my furnace was 20 years old. It wasn't going to last much longer. And if you're adding air conditioning or replacing an air conditioner, if you do that, you can take credit for the fact that you're not buying a furnace, you're not buying an air conditioner. And also, Xcel now has very, very attractive rebates. A typical sized cold climate heat pump for a home, you might have a rebate of $7,000. Operating costs, it's close to gas again if you use the electricity wisely to take advantage of time of use rates. And when you go all electric and they disconnect your home gas supply, you save about $200 a year in the hookup charge. In terms of performance, in my experience was the heat pump kept our house warm a couple winters ago in Golden when the outdoor air temperature was negative 15 degrees. Hit that for 2 days in a row. I have an electric resistance heater I can use as a backup, but I have a disconnect switch on it, and I've never used it, never needed it. That's how good these cold climate heat pumps are. My heat pumper now provides air at a temperature of about 108 degrees Fahrenheit. The old furnace did it like at 120. So it's not as warm, but it's warmer than your skin temperature. So you don't feel a cold draft or anything. It runs continuously and quietly at a low flow rate all day long. Uh, if I do go on vacation, I got to use the app on my iPhone and heat it back up because it doesn't blast heat like a furnace does. So it takes a little while longer to warm up, and you have to be aware of that. So the Colorado clean heat issue in a nutshell. We're a national leader in decarbonizing our grid and in EV sales. However, our electrification, in my view, is way too slow. Why is it too slow? PSCO, Public Service of Colorado, an Xcel company, is both a for-profit electric and a gas utility. Um, Promotion of all electric buildings undermines their gas business, and it's a voluntary program. I don't think it's reasonable to expect an utility that earns a profit from both its gas and electric business to give up its gas business. So I think we have to be stronger about how we push this. At least 35,000 new Colorado homes will get gas infrastructure right now. Those homes are going to be committed for decades to burn natural gas, is my concern. The Colorado building electrification or clean heat targets are weak relative to how serious climate change is, and Piesco is not even meeting those low targets. This is just a picture of my house. I do have a solar array. That was my first electric car, a 2017 Chevy Bolt. And so this is the future, homes and vehicles all electric. And happy to answer any questions if we have the time. Sorry for that slow start.
No problem at all, Chuck. That was fantastic. We have some of our guests on the screen here, and also we have the Q&A open. So if anybody wants to ask questions, but let me just share very quickly one more thing. I need to complete my presentation to you. So just a second. Slideshow, play from start, and okay, so we need to back up here. Oops, sorry. All right, so what we hope everybody will do is stand up for Colorado's health, safety, climate, and consumers at the January 20th PUC public hearing on the Xcel Gas Infrastructure Plan. Again, as we've said, our Colorado statute requires the gas utilities to reduce emissions by 22% by 2030, and they are not on track, and they will not meet that target by billing consumers millions to invest in gas pipeline infrastructure as they intend to do, as stated in their current plan. Your voice is needed at this remote Public Utilities Commission hearing Tuesday, January 20th at 5 p.m. I will share information about it. And we encourage everybody to advocate for health, safety, climate, and consumers. And one more note is we have the Colorado legislative session having started just 2 days ago. And one of the things that's going to be happening in this legislative session is what's called the reauthorization or sunset renewal of the Public Utilities Commission's mandate. In other words, the guiding legislation that gives it its scope of work and empowers it to do what it does. We want to promote equity. We want to promote enforcement with a strong mandate to enforce and capacity to enforce. We want them to implement our laws that reduce fossil fuel investment, and we want to stop false solutions like carbon capture, hydrogen, and nuclear power. So that's our agenda. But the reason for this particular webinar is to focus on the GIP and get people to participate in the public hearing on the 20th. I'll stop sharing right now. And I just want to say, come back on the screen here. Hello, everybody. So there is an option for written comment. You can still testify at the hearing and submit additional written comments. Your time will be limited, but the great thing about showing up at the hearing is that the public gets to hear from itself. The public gets to know that we are not alone in our advocacy, and the media has a better opportunity to hear from us all. The written comments will be read by the commission, but it is very hard to see for the public to see those written comments. So I encourage people to take both avenues, but if for some reason you cannot attend on January 20th, next Tuesday, it's from 5 p.m. to 6:30. You can submit written comments instead or in addition. So I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but would anybody like to come off screen and, I mean, just state their questions, or is there anything that you would like to share with us as the attendees here? And I'll give everybody a chance to chat and appear. So does anybody have any questions for us? None at all? Anybody want to share their experiences or other the reason why they're here today or anything like that? If not, we can end early and I can give you back some time in your day. Anyone? Questions, comments, discussion? We have a quiet audience. Well, thank you very much for listening. I will follow up with links so that you can register to join the hearing. And there is a talking points document from our allies that I'll share and other follow-up. And I hope we'll come together and also work on the legislative session together as well. So thanks very much for being here and have a great rest of your day. Big thanks to our panelists too. Thank you, Tracy, Chuck, Patricia. Bye-bye.
I want to say that we did such a good job. They didn't have questions.
That's right.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.
Yeah, have a good day. Thanks, Lauren. Always good to work with you.
Pleasure's mine. Take care. Bye-bye.